Hello, listeners, and thank you for joining me. I'm your host, Ty Walters, and today's episode is a discussion with Yasine Honerkamp. He is a customer experience project manager at SellerSmile, and just this January, he's been with us for over 4 years. And this is the first time we've had Yasine on the podcast. So welcome, Yasine. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ty. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, as always. First time on video and on podcast, so excited to be here.
Excited that you're here. So, Yasine, I just mentioned to you before this conversation that I wanted to have you on the podcast to talk about your life as a customer service professional. You, out of our team, you're one of the most traveled. You're always on the go. And right now, I'll let you get into it, but you're speaking to us from the Canary Islands off the coast of Morocco. And that's one of just a few places that you've been recently. I think it's really fascinating. I've been at home for a while in one location, but you're out traveling. So we're going to get to talk about your history, your background, and what you're doing today and what you might be doing next. So really excited to get into this, but Yasine, please kick it off. Share with us, who are you? What's your origin story? Get into it and tell us maybe what life was like leading up to before you joined SellerSmile.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So as you know, my name's Yasine. I'm originally from Morocco, but I moved to the United States when I was about 9 years old. My father got a job at the University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia, and I grew up there. That's where I did almost all of my schooling, elementary school, all the way through university, all actually along the same street. So Athens, I would say, is more my home, more so than Morocco at this point. And yeah, I really love growing up there. A university town, so still a multicultural experience, which I think also kind of influenced me in general, as well as just my parents' past travels and their own experiences to get out more and learn more about new cultures and experience new peoples, new places. And yeah, so I grew up in Athens, as I said, and then I recently actually completed my master's degree, and that was in Washington, D.C. area at Virginia Tech. They have a northern campus up there, and that was in a master's in business with a focus in international tourism and hospitality relations. So again, as you can see, my focus kind of narrowed into this focus area where I am now. And during my master's degree, actually midway exactly, is when the pandemic began. And we were actually on spring break when it all kind of started happening. I remember our break was extended by 1 week. And then we got an email from the school saying that we were not coming back. So it was very abrupt. I never saw any of my professors, any of my friends from my classes, and especially due to the nature of the program, a lot of people were working in the hospitality and tourism industry, and many of them were greatly affected. Many lost their jobs or were furloughed, had to find new jobs, and it was a very difficult time for a lot of my classmates. And luckily, I was already working here at SellerSmile, where I had a remote job, and largely unaffected personally. But, I knew a lot of people that were kind of, in a state of limbo, I would say. I ended up staying there for about another semester. And then my landlord actually ended up selling the apartment that I was living in. So during my last semester, I moved back to Athens, back in with my parents to finish my degree. And then again, at the time, this was in January of 2021. So the pandemic was still, I guess the world was still in a kind of unstable state. People didn't really know what was going on, especially in that realm. State of travel was still in a huge amount of disarray. So many different complications. So I stayed in Athens for a little bit longer to finish my degree. And then once I finished it, in the summer of 2021, things had kind of settled down, especially more so on the travel side. More countries were opening up their borders. US travelers could travel to Europe, especially, which was probably the major development. And that's what I ended up doing, actually. So I ended up going to Lisbon, Portugal first. And how I ended up deciding on that was, I was continuing my work and I finished my master's degree. I wanted to try and see, try to get into the field, but at the time things were still quite, up in the air, I would say. So I decided to I was in a position to be able to travel and to experience the world and see how, I guess, especially that industry, hospitality and tourism, had been affected worldwide. And that's what I ended up doing. I moved to Lisbon, Portugal, and how I decided on that was I kind of just did a simple Google search about, top destinations for digital nomads. And for those listening that may not have experience with this term, digital nomads is basically just someone who is working remotely and travels around, staying in places from anywhere from, a couple of weeks to a year or 2 years, and all the time working, but also just experiencing new places as they go along. And at the time, Lisbon was the #1 destination in the world for digital nomads. So a few things that influenced me for Lisbon was, one, the second language is English. So that made things a lot easier if not to learn a new language. Although I did want to when I was there, that's another story. And the weather was great. I think it has about 300 daylight hours or days of the year where there's sun almost constantly, and which is like one of the highest in the world. The only times where it really gets cold is probably from the months of November, maybe through January. So being from Morocco, growing up in Athens, not really used to the cold very much. So I wanted to kind of escape it. So that was another factor. And then also it's close to my original home, Morocco. And my mother is also from France. So I was nearby to there as well. And that's how I ended up in Lisbon.
Such kind of like a winding path, and responding, of course, to the tragedy of kind of the pandemic and how that changed everyone's lives. I remember back then how disappointed I was for you, because you had to kind of put your life on hold and switch things, and it was really inconvenient moving cities, negotiating the lease, the sale of the building. But I'm happy to hear that you considered yourself relatively unaffected. It was, I think, during that time we were all reflecting on how grateful we were to continue to have our employment relatively unaffected, being in higher demand rather, due to the situation. I have tons of notes. I want to visit as much of this as we can. Going back to Athens, as many, or as some listeners know, SellerSmile was founded in Athens. I lived there myself for a few years. And so I get it. I really enjoyed my time there. You mentioned it being a college city and having kind of like that international feel. I've lived in other college towns and I understand what you mean. There's a diversity of different foods, people, music, culture that you see and are exposed to. It doesn't mean it's necessarily inherently more valuable always, but it's just different than what you'd see in a typical culture. So that's really that's interesting to hear that it was impactful for you as a young person, and leading to your comfort traveling through multiple countries in a time when it's not easy to travel. Can you talk to us a little bit about so Portugal? You're mentioning 300 days of sun per year. As you said that, I googled what it is for where I live near Seattle, Washington. I'm only at 152, so that's double the sun. It just seems I love it here, but it's just a different experience, I'm sure. And you said it's perfect weather today. So do you miss Portugal, or is where you're at similar to how it was there?
Yeah, I definitely miss Portugal. I'm currently in Las Palmas in Gran Canaria, off of the coast of Morocco, as you mentioned. I would say it's a kind of a similar vibe. People here are more laid back. It's not as stressful. People aren't running, from their job to their home, back and forth. And, it's just less, I guess, activity. Things are a bit slower here. And I think that's a positive thing. People just seem more relaxed in general, and they're more welcoming, they're friendlier, they have more time for their family, their friends, to help a stranger out if necessary. And I would say those are the most similar as far as the two. Although Lisbon is a much larger city, it is the capital of Portugal, you still don't get the feel that it's the capital city. It kind of feels almost a similar atmosphere to Athens, Georgia, I would say. Uh, you know, kind of a smaller place, but you're still in a much larger environment. And again, due to it being the number one destination for digital nomads, you meet all sorts of people that are coming in for various reasons. Many end up, a lot of the people that I met in particular, were coming in for maybe 1 or 2 weeks or maybe a month just to see how things are. And I met people that had done that and then they ended up staying 1, 2, 3, 4 years even, and they're still living there. Something about Lisbon is kind of like maybe like a magical feel where you just feel this attraction. You're pulled in by the people, the culture, the food, the sun, never-ending sun, and you end up staying there for usually longer than you originally intended, which I think is nice.
I mentioned to you when I heard you're moving there, I heard an interview with Peter Levels. He's the founder of Remote OK. And I heard an interview with him. He was talking about the surge of remote workers, so to speak, of going to Portugal from around the world. And he was speaking to some of those reasons, like the weather. It's almost identical to maybe San Francisco or LA, maybe closer to LA actually. And it's just really pleasant. It's warm. And if you're into that, it's a easy transition. The government, the culture, all of these things that modern remote workers are looking for. They want to feel welcomed, and they want to go out and experience things with like-minded people. So I'm really happy that you were able to experience that, and I'm hoping that more places in the world turn into that, because it just opens it up for visitors. People reluctant to go might change their mind if it's this environment that's really welcoming and hospitable. So I'm happy that you were treated well there. Can you tell me, it sounds like you're talking to others like yourself that are testing being a remote worker or a digital nomad, like you said, or some that have been doing it for a longer time and maybe are nationalizing in Portugal. But tell me some of the things that you're hearing from these people, and where are they from? Are they in it for the same goals as you, kind of trying to find what to do in between the pandemic? Are they looking for that job that's going to allow them to travel? Or tell some stories.
Absolutely. I would say it's probably a mixture of both. There are those that were like me, already previously working remotely. Maybe they had their own companies or they're freelancers. And then there's the other half who, due to the pandemic, their jobs shifted to a remote platform, and they were able to, especially from the people that I've met, especially in Lisbon, many are Europeans. So it being inside of the European Union, there are no limitations for other European Union passport holders for how long you can stay, or any registration for citizenship or residency, anything like that is a lot less complex. And I guess due to that freedom, there's a lot of people that are traveling within the EU. And again, due to the pandemic, they are able to continue their work online. And many, especially when I went, and especially now, I would say more so due to being kind of closing down the winter months. But many of them are from countries, Norway or France, things like that, where it gets quite cold, and they just want sunny better place to work, a more comfortable environment with fellow people. A lot of the people that you meet in these places, especially the remote workers, are kind of all have a similar mindset. They're more maybe open-minded, and they're all traveling kind of for the same reasons to experience, new people, new cultures, meet others who are doing the same, and have new experiences with them.
As someone who grew up in Wisconsin, I understand what it's like to be in those cold, dark days of a long winter. And whenever I'm in a warmer climate, it just feels better. It feels like I'm on vacation. And that's what it felt like when I was living in Athens, Georgia for that time. Um, don't get me wrong. Again, I love where I'm at now, but such a nice feeling to be outside in a t-shirt, maybe on the beach with a nice sunset. You've sent us some great pictures during your travels. So I want to go back to you. You mentioned your master's degree and you finished that degree. You started it pre-COVID. It got slightly interrupted and you finished from home. I want to hear what that was like, kind of switching the transition for you. And then also you mentioned the impact on the industry. The hospitality industry, as we know, was severely impacted, especially right away or earlier. What do you see in the horizon for that? Do you feel like it's coming back, or do you see it coming back in the places you've been?
Absolutely. I love the program. It was a great experience. I met people from all over the world, places that I probably never would have expected to meet people. Some of my closest friends are from northern mountains of Pakistan or from Saudi Arabia. It's not the usual people you would meet, I would say, in the United States, in general, or even maybe in a university town. Pretty unique places that attracted the kind of people that I was in a program with, along with a mixture of a lot of people who worked already in the hospitality industry for larger companies such as Marriott or other large hotel branches and things like that. But yeah, it was a great program. I learned a lot about the hospitality industry and tourism especially. And as we've mentioned, it was greatly impacted. A lot of people are kind of still trying to just scramble and figure things out. I think from what I heard, things may not be back to normal, quote unquote, for another 2 or 3 years. And I mean, I think as opposed to that, there's also going to be a lot of innovation in the industry, uh, especially, through digital means. I think there's a lot more that we thought was possible than previously thought. And yeah, I'm excited to the future. I'm not personally sure whether I'll work for a larger company like that, or maybe try to work more for myself. My original intention was to go into ecotourism, sustainable tourism in my home country in Morocco. We have some close family friends that are working in that field, and they were interested in working with me once I had my master's degree. So that's my intention still. Still trying to figure it out. I'm just taking things, slow, one day at a time, but we will see.
Yasine, I want to talk to you about customer service and shift a little bit towards what you do at SellerSmile and just kind of maybe your ideas about customer service and customer experience as a shopper yourself. So tell us in your own words, what is it like your day to day here? What are some of the things that you're doing and you're responsible for? And then maybe we can talk a little bit about some things that are at the top of your list for like, I don't know, as a shopper, these absolutely will surprise you and make your day, or these will absolutely deter me.
Yeah, working for SellerSmile has been great. I was the founding employee, I think you would describe me as. So I was the original, the first employee. Now we're a team of over 12 people. So I've watched it grow quite exponentially over the past 4 years that I've been there. At the time that I was hired, I think we were all three of us were still working our full-time jobs and working part-time at SellerSmile, mornings and evenings, trying to develop the company and the brand. And where we are now. Obviously, we've been quite successful due to various reasons. I'm very thankful for that. Um, I didn't know anything about e-commerce in general when I first started, and now I feel like I have quite the content knowledge. As far as what I do, at first I started as a customer service agent at SellerSmile, so mainly dealing with any kind of issues that the sellers and companies that we work for, any issues that customers may have, whether it be related to a shipment that may be missing or an order that they placed, any questions about products in general, kind of over encompassing uh, expert for the brand or the seller. And I learned a lot in that aspect, a lot more about customer service than I ever thought I would, and as well as just e-commerce and online remote working. I would say it's kind of a threefold process: learning how to work remotely. I'd never done that before. Learning e-commerce and then developing my customer service skills, all kind of in a day-to-day basis. And actually probably four, I guess, working in a startup company and growing, this idea that I had formed and establishing it into a solid business. Nowadays, I'm more focused on the process side of things. I'm a customer experience project manager. So basically, to sum it up, I would say I try to make things easier for the team on a day-to-day basis, make things a little bit less complicated and uh, less long, I guess, from point A to point B, and just help them get there faster and have a good experience.
You mentioned the startup being one of those sections of something content that you had to learn, and I completely agree. And it still feels like that. It'll probably feel like that forever. And Amazon says it's always day one, and I think you're right. But Yasine, we've talked about your academic pursuits. You're a very good learner. You're quick. You're fast learner. So I think that's what helped you and SellerSmile ultimately succeed in that startup phase when you sort of need to wear so many hats. You've studied formally hospitality in that industry. Now you're in customer service. They seem very similar or close because I'm thinking about when I'm visiting a hotel or in a hospitality situation, it's Airbnb maybe. I'm thinking about the customer service I receive from the platform or the host. Do any other similarities come to mind, or do you think about them with similar thoughts?
Absolutely, I would say they are similar. I mean, in the end, you're helping someone have the best experience they can through a platform, which is whether it be Airbnb or whether it be a physical platform. The person comes, with maybe a little knowledge or wanting to learn more about, whether it be a product or a service. And we're here to help them explain and have them have the best experience that they can have and make them more prepared for whatever it is they want to do, whether they want to purchase, a new phone or travel to a new place. I think those are kind of tied in the thought process and maybe making that kind of final decision to make the jump and do that.
Yasine, I want to transition now and ask you a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of working and traveling at the same time. I'm sure at sometimes it's a challenge, and I've witnessed some of your challenges. Sometimes you get held up at an airport or you need documentation last minute recently, but talk to us about maybe some of the challenges that you've had to overcome to continue traveling, because in everyone's mind they have this Instagram version of the beaches and the laptop on your seat with the drink, but it's not all like that all the time, is it?
No, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head there. It's definitely not uh, daisies and roses all the time. I would say there are fewer challenges than there are positive experiences for sure. But yeah, I mean, especially in the these days, in the almost kind of we're still in it, but I would say maybe post-pandemic, there's still a lot of restrictions on travel, especially to parts of the world like Southeast Asia, Africa. Those areas are still more impacted, and still maybe developing countries are a bit slower on recovery than the Western world. Although, in the Western world, although things have kind of come to a head and things are definitely a lot smoother. When I originally started traveling, I had no idea, what I was in for. I didn't know. I tried to be as prepared as possible. I had to get the vaccine passports. I had to get the PCR test, antigen test. There's a passenger locator form. So when you arrive somewhere, the government knows where you're staying, and in case, you did contract COVID, they would be able to tell the other passengers on the plane that they were exposed, things like that. Something you would never really think of in the past. So definitely some challenges in travel, and there were a few instances where I was kind of got stuck somewhere. Especially in the pandemic, things are changing constantly on a daily basis. Maybe one country has these regulations, but the airline has a different set of regulations that they have to uphold. And as a passenger, it's not very easy to find that information. And sometimes you just have to roll with things and go with the flow, whether it be stuck in the airport for 20 hours, which happened to me, or you miss your flight. You might be in a place a few weeks longer if you do contract COVID or exposed to it. Things like that are something you're not generally prepared for, but you just have to roll with it. As far as other challenges, I would say the remote travel lifestyle comes with some challenges. I mean, when you're kind of just living out of a suitcase a lot of the time, I feel like most people that I meet probably stay in places for, maybe a number of weeks, up to maybe 2 or 3 months at a time. Although there are people that obviously do settle down or kind of do a slow travel version where they may go to a place for 6 months or a year. And that does make things a bit easier. But, you're also meeting a lot of new people, making new friends, locals, as well as other travelers. And another challenge is it can be a bit lonely because you make all these new friends and then you have to leave them, after a few months. And usually maybe you can try to make plans to see them along the way down the line. But it is a challenge to establish and almost kind of break the relationships so quickly. And then, starting over in a new place, getting to know the new culture, new languages at times if you're not familiar. Obviously knowing English helps a lot, as it is one of the most spoken languages, and most people, most places have a general basic understanding. And if you don't, you can make do with some sort of signs. But I would say those are probably the main challenges.
Thank you for reviewing those. I want to end it on a positive note, but we have not revealed you are multilingual. You speak English, French. You said you learned another language recently. Was it Portuguese?
Spanish.
Spanish?
And Chinese Spanish.
There are others. Arabic? Tell me
Yeah.
more. So I'm just not saying it. You probably have an elevated understanding of language in general, but like you're mentioning, it's always going to be complicated. And if you don't have language, you can use rudimentary sign language and get where you're going. I want to talk about some of the highlights. So struggle, yes, travel is always an issue, but talk to me about some of the top moments, some of the reasons that keep you doing this, and I would like to hear maybe what's next if you know where you're going after this stop in the Gran Canaria.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think my whole life, growing up, I think the first time I was on a plane, I was 6 months old. My parents are maybe I would say original nomads. My father's from the United States, Los Angeles originally. My mother's from France, Dijon, where the mustard comes from. And they both left their respective homes and traveled to many different countries before settling in Morocco, where they lived for quite a while, almost 20 years, and where I was born and adopted. And then we moved to the United States. But through their travels and their experiences, they made so many friends all over the world. And, growing up, I met a lot of these people, and I always had kind of a multicultural upbringing just due to the nature of where we lived and the people that my parents know and are friends with. And I believe that had quite a large influence on my own life. And I wanted to kind of continue and extend that, maybe as almost like an homage to my parents' past. And yeah, I mean, I've had a great time, and I've always kind of strived to learn as much about the world and cultures, people as possible. So, when I realized that that was possible through remote working, and, luckily I'm a dual citizen, especially in Europe, it makes things easier. I don't have a kind of time limit on when I have to leave. So, yeah, now here I am, and there's a lot still to explore. And, I think it makes you more of a person, of a cultured person, and just meeting new people, experiencing new places, learning about them and their upbringings, their struggles, their challenges. All of that is, how they are as a person, and it kind of impacts on you, I would say, and you have just a better understanding of how the world works, one day at a time. And I guess I would say that is my end goal.
When I've had the opportunity to travel, those are the times where I've learned most about myself and my roots, because you see the contrast more starkly. It's easy to be blind to things, perhaps when you're right there in the middle of it. But just learning about the differences helps you understand how unique yourself can be. I want to end it by saying, like, if there's any kind of last words that you'd like to share about either customer service or customer experience, or any words of advice towards people trying to do or thinking about doing what you're actively doing, working and traveling the world. Anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, for traveling the world, I would say, especially if you're in a position to do so, I know there's so much to think about and so much to consider, and maybe you're unsure about making that jump into things, and it's obviously a huge decision. I would say if you're in a position to do so, just go for it. A lot of the time, you'll find that a lot of the challenges or things that you may have been possibly overthinking kind of dissipate, and along the way, you learn a lot more about yourself and the world as a whole. And, through your work, you're continuing your work and also sharing it with others who are also interested, or they may be in the same field, and you may get new ideas for your own work and your own business. So it's always a great opportunity if you're able to do so, I would do so. Customer service wise, I think, especially in this day and age, where in such a digital age where everybody expects kind of instant gratification, and a lot of it is just based off of others' opinions, I would say, definitely read into all of that. And, I feel like these days people do a lot more research on products or services before they do make that decision. Definitely do that, but also try and form your own opinion outside of maybe reading others, and whether that be going to see the product or service in person, or maybe closer family, friends, or friends that have experienced it, and yeah, just just go with the flow. And most decisions that we make, in the end, we end up making the right decision. And if not, you always learn from your mistakes and are more prepared for the next decision. So.
Thank you so much for joining us, Yasine. I'm going to have you back on to talk about some more aspects of your travels and catch up with an update, perhaps. You're into photography. I want to know how that's been going. And I also want to talk to you more once hospitality kicks up again and get your thoughts on that. Could I ask you to give us a sign off in the language that you learned? And then maybe you can tell people how to reach you if they'd like to connect with you. And if you'd like to prefer to stay anonymous, maybe you can drop a link of like your favorite charity.
Absolutely. So adios, hasta luego. So goodbye and see you in the future. You can reach me, probably easiest would be Instagram. It's Yasine _ easy to reach there. As Ty mentioned, I'm into photography, so I'm on there every day, several times a day. And yeah, for as far as charities go, I would say, right now in the global situation we're in, there's obviously a crisis in the Ukraine. The Red Cross is doing a huge effort to assist. So if you're interested, definitely go to the redcross.com and assist if you can.
Thank you. We'll put that link in the show notes. Last question, I promise, Yasine. Tell us, how did you get this scar near your right eye?
Yeah, so on Saturday I did a hike, and I separated myself from the group as I wanted to explore a higher peak near the trail, and I went off to explore it. And on the way back down, I noticed that my pockets felt a bit lighter, and what had ended up happening was my phone fell out of my pocket, and my phone case is brown and the phone is black. So it blended in entirely with the wilderness, especially in the mountain kind of rocks and the bushes. So I was searching for it for about 30 or 40 minutes before I tried to find the rest of my group, because I was fruitless in the effort of finding my phone. And I ended up kind of running around for about another hour until I found them. And I was actually able to track my phone down through the Find My iPhone app, an application that Apple has established. And I just followed the GPS signal back to where my phone was. And when I was walking back up to the peak, I was too busy being focused on my friend's phone who I borrowed to track my phone. And I was kind of just walking up the hill. And then I looked up to see where I was going. I ran straight into a branch and I missed my actual eye by about maybe less than an inch. So I'm lucky to just have this scar and not missing eye or a patch. Yeah. So that's how it happened.
I'm glad that it didn't stab you right in the eyeball, and I'm glad you found your phone. I've used that app too. Yes. It's a lifesaver.
Absolutely.
Cool. Thanks, Yasine. To find the show notes, which include links to the articles and resources discussed, go to sellersmile.com/032. If you found my conversation with Yasine valuable, hit subscribe and you'll get the next straight to your device. Thanks again and keep smiling.